Are all of your players healthy and available to participate in day one of training camp?
Yes, all players are healthy and available. Were you specifically asking about anyone individual?
No. It just seems like a thing we should ask, given various news around the league.
Sorry for a little delay. I had a big Terry Fox run this morning. So.
Bobby, does this? How much of this team, as constructed, feels like a team you would put your stamp on as a general manager?
Yeah, I mean, heavily involved in all the decisions that sort of brought us here. So yeah, I mean, I think probably the most recent piece is Brandon, right? And so been big fans of Brandon since I think he was in a draft that we had a lottery pick, if I remember. So we scouted him pretty well. Colin, obviously, we had 2 years to watch him. So and then all the other guys from before. But yeah, I'd probably say the two biggest, the most recent additions, Brandon and Colin, feel very much like decisions that heavily involved in.
Well, I'm sure you guys are still going to be prioritizing growth and development. I think it's safe to say that expectations are a little bit different this year in that the results are going to matter more than the last couple of years. What are your expectations and what would a successful season for this team look like to you?
I think listen, Darko's great at this. Win the day, 1% better, no finish line. I think you have to build a team that way. If you have a specific goal in mind, a specific win where you want to enter, I just don't know if that's sort of the best way to build, especially a young group. These guys, they're sort of, when they lock in, that day-to-day improvement is what ends up resulting in, being in the playoffs or being in the play-in. We won 30 games last year, so I don't think there's any sort of illusions of, expectations of this number of wins or this playoff seed. But I truly we'll see. You'll see in training camp, you'll see as preseason involves. We feel like the summer's been incredible for these guys. Brandon's healthy. We have a starting group that we really haven't ever seen play together. And Darko's in year 3, so I think we have a lot of things in our favor, a lot of things that suggest we'll be competitive. But we haven't put that full season together yet. And I think that's the challenge for this group is, from the first game there at Atlanta, can they be competitive? Can they turn back? Can they fly back around? Can they play Friday night? Can they play Saturday night? Can you do that on a consistent basis? And then we can have the conversation of where do we think this team will be or where do we think this team can be at the end of the season.
Is there anything about Brandon's game, maybe like an underrated component of it that you think makes him a better basketball fit with this roster than might appear on paper?
I think the shot creation obviously is clear, right? He's one of the few guys who can go get his own shot, but also can go get a pretty efficient shot on his own. And I think that's something that we've lacked a bit in prior years. I think he's sort of like when they say a comic's comic, he's like a hooper's hooper. I think people that watch him and people that have seen film on him, high level of skill, 3-level scorer, not all that interested in what's going on off the court, not all that interested in, what people say about him. We had another guy that was sort of like that, but this guy, he just loves playing basketball, and I think it's fun to watch him. It's fun to watch him warm up. It's fun to watch him play. So yeah, we're excited to see him.
What's your message been to Scotty this offseason, and what are your expectations for him coming to this year?
Continue to lead. I think he's growing up. Obviously, had a baby, so everybody grows up when you have a kid. I think the baselines for Scotty, just met with him yesterday, are his defense, his energy, his rebounding, keeping the team together. Right, the starting unit will be interesting to see how they mesh. The scoring, I think, comes. It can come easily for him when he gets early seals, when he attacks the rim, when he gets to the free throw line. So you don't want to put so much pressure on his scoring. It's sort of all the other stuff, and I think that's a really high floor for Scotty.
How much or how little has your day-to-day changed in this newish role going into camp?
Well, you combine the role with the new ownership, right? And I think that's probably the two things that have changed the most. Like anything, it's probably more of a relationship with ownership and sort of understanding what they're looking for, educating them. Board meetings obviously feel a little bit different, and things are changing up there. But from the day-to-day, what goes on in here, very little.
What kind of things would you like to imprint on this team under your leadership?
Good question, Doug. So there's a balance of, we have continuity, right? And so you don't want to sort of get away from that, but you also don't sort of want to be afraid to make change. And I think that's sort of where we are. And as you guys know me, it's not my natural personality. I'm not going to come out here and sort of, make, sweeping statements and, pound my fist on the table. So it's really still an assessment. I think the tough part is we didn't get to see this team play. I think if we get to see this team play, then hopefully I and our group will more quickly be able to make those decisions. But it's really difficult before you see Brandon with this group, or before you see Colin play, or before you see sort of Darko have a team like this to coach, to say, okay, we're going to make a ton of changes. But I do think what hopefully you'll see, and as I evaluate the team and our group evaluates the team, is we won't be afraid to make change. And I think you've seen that the 12 years I've been here before. We're going to not think the same way as the rest of the NBA. We're going to not, sort of follow the leader in that sense. And so I think what you've come to expect and know from us, which is we're going to take the player we like. We're not going to take the player that everybody thinks we're going to take, and we'll make the trade that we want to make and not what everyone else says. And so that theme, I think, will always carry through.
What do you think of Colin and where he fits into a young team, but a lot of guys who played will play ahead of him? You may not have to play a lot. Is that a good situation for rookies?
I think for sure. I think him, very rarely do you see a rookie come in and impact the game in a positive way. I think the one area he can do, and is probably the best way for rookies, is on the defensive end. He's incredibly disruptive defensively, and we've seen that here in September. You saw it in college, you saw it in summer league. So I think that probably would be the incentive for the coaches to put him in the game. But he's got a long ways to go. I think he's, still got a 20-year-old body. He's still getting used to, he hasn't even been on a road trip yet in the NBA. But I think, you'll see on the defensive end as well here where he'll really make his impact, and I think where he could play right away.
You said you need to see this team play, and obviously coming off 30 wins, there's a lot of a burden of proof, but the financial situation of the team as well. Is there actually more of an urgency to assess the team than there might be in a lot of cases for a team that's sort of building up from outside of the playoffs?
The financial piece, I've seen that this summer. I don't even know how big of a story that one is. I think obviously that those who know, like, you can make one, the likelihood that this team is the exact same team by the end of the year is probably zero. And then put on top of that with, sort of one move you can get under the tax. So I don't see that as the urgent piece. I think maybe your earlier point was like, the basketball is always the urgent piece, right? If we don't come out and we're not competitive and we're having, then it forces us to evaluate it. But I don't think it's exacerbated by any other outside timeline or financial pressure. I think we are fortunate to be in one of the biggest, most lucrative markets in the NBA, and so I don't see the financial piece, affecting us.
Speaking of the financial situation, you guys extended Jakob Poeltl this summer, but there's also Ochai, who's extension eligible, and RJ ends up being extension eligible in October. Have discussions started to happen?
Obviously, we'll keep that stuff private. I think with the Yak one, which we got, we're able to sort of keep this year, next year flat, and sort of when we had more flexibility in the future, increase it there. And the other two guys, obviously, we'll let it play out, but we're not going to discuss any of that publicly.
Clearly, you guys have been impressed with what you've seen so far from Darko as the leader of a rebuilding team. Talked about maybe shifting expectations a little bit this year. What do you expect to learn about him as a head coach this season in this situation?
I think any year you're an NBA head coach, you learn a ton, right? So the first year, I remember even talking to Nick Nurse, is sort of, what do you learn off the court? There's so many things off the court, right? Sort of scheduling, how do you get things in line? Darko has been a head coach previously, whether it was in the G League and International, so he had that. Then you have personalities, and so how are you managing the personalities? Those personalities change every single year. But I do think this year, not a ton new personalities. Obviously, the starting group is very familiar. We bring in Sandro, we bring in Colin. So I think it's a bit of stability. I told someone the other day, even on our staffing side, we haven't brought in anybody new. And so there's a bit of that where I think for Darko is really settling in. He had one big summer of development. This is his second big summer of development. As you guys know, that was one of the big reasons why we hired him. And so, I think this is, there's no pressure on him in that sense. I think obviously he has his own expectations of himself, and you guys will talk to him on Monday. But he knows he can coach. He knows he's incredibly well, communicating with these players. They all know their roles. They all know, what the expectations are from them. I think it's just another year of growth with him too.
With RJ, he's been in trade rumors over the course of the summer, and he was the leading scorer for this team. You mentioned Brandon's importance as a scorer. How do you see his role on the team going forward, and what are his expectations like?
I think with RJ, we're talked a lot about his efficiency, and so his catch and shoot continue to improve, getting to the free throw line. Don't expect him to see as many double teams, as much sort of attention. So now he gets to attack some closeouts on the weak side, and I think all the things he's really good at, getting to the rim, catch and shoot. So I think the more you see that and the more efficient he is, the more valuable he'll be. And then listen, we push him on the other end too for defense and rebounding, and he knows that. So.
You had a really solid group of rookies last season, in Jamal and Jacoby and all of them. As this team gets a little bit more healthy this season, how will their roles change within the system?
So that 5 from last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun group. They love hanging out with each other. I think when you can get them to let their hair down a bit online, you see sort of their personalities come out, and now is another year of it. So probably people know Jamal hosted a group of them down in Austin, so that's cool to see. Listen, it's really hard to be good as a rookie. I think it's less hard to be good as a sophomore. So they're no longer sort of the shiny new toy, and I think that's always a good. It's a good experience for them, to say, hey, I'm not the first round pick or I'm not the second round pick, and there's someone coming behind me and pushing. And so we also want. It's not just sort of fun and games. Is you have competition behind you. You have to build on last year. You weren't that good, and so how do you continue to get better? I think they love doing it as a group, and it's fun. But they're no longer rookies.
You talked about CMB and going on a road trip. You mentioned that you want to see this team play consistently through the dregs of the season. I think a lot of lip service is given to the war of attrition, but from the outside perspective, it seems like most decision making is based on talent. How do you feel about the talent of the roster right now?
That's a good one. I think the talent level is high, but we still have to see the fit, and I think that's sort of what everyone is probably waiting to see and has been waiting for a while. So we're waiting right there with you. Specifically with regard to Colin, I think he's high level talent. I think the defensive instincts and versatility is really special, and it stood out. Stood out to us in the draft. But I think we have enough talent.
I want to ask you personally. In the course of this job search that took place this summer, what were your conversations like with the new ownership? What were they looking for in particular, and how do you think sort of they settled on you in this position?
I'm not privy to all of that. I think, let's think back. So we have the draft, we have free agency, summer league. It was a bit more of an informal process. I sort of met all of the, lead characters. There's a new, obviously, leadership. There's a new board. There's a new ownership group. And so a lot of it was more informally, sitting with them, having them to get to know me. Obviously, with Edward and Tony, I've been here 12 years, so they know me. But I think maybe more on a personal level, sort of, who I am, where I come from, sort of what I believe in. So I think that felt that. Keith, we had the benefit of having the year previously, but having more sort of day-to-day, weekly conversations with him has been really interesting and really good for me to learn. He comes from a huge sports background, not necessarily a basketball background, but he's built teams. He's obviously been part of, the Toronto sports scene, so he knows that. But it wasn't sort of a formal do this X, Y, and Z. It was much more of meet this person, go to dinner, go to their office and meet with them.
Can I also ask you about Masai as well? Obviously, you worked with Masai very closely. He brought you on as assistant GM and promoted you multiple times. Did you get any feedback from him in this process and sort of what you learned from Masai?
Masai's incredibly supportive. He wants us all to succeed, whether it's, Jeff or Teresa or myself. And I think that's not always easy in those positions. And I think for him to be incredibly supportive and, obviously I kept him up to date on the process and he's very supportive. But I think when you look back on it, it was, a really good pairing and, I guess maybe a kid from Africa and a kid Hawaii, it sort of worked really well for a while. And so for him to sort of have that support behind me as I sort of move on is great.
Bobby, is it strange not having Masai to refer to or kind of consult with on the day-to-day?
I can still if I need to, yeah. I think, for, as you guys know, Masai is incredibly intense, inspirational, love to give a good motivational speak. So we'll probably miss those, but it's also a great time for us to sort of spread our wings as well.
Brandon obviously didn't play a lot last year, has had his ups and downs with health. Do you envision any sort of load management plan with him? Is he going to be playing back-to-backs, or is this more something where he's all systems go?
There's been any, limitation so far, I think, was an ankle sprain, which is, maybe different than, having a surgery or something like that. But, we'll see how preseason goes. We'll see how he responds to, playing 32 minutes a night, 35 minutes a night. So maybe the jury's out there, but no current plans on Brandon.
There's a lot of, potential rotation players on this roster. In your experience, what does the level of competition within roster do to help a team take that next step?
I think it's hugely important. I think it's something we probably missed, as we sort of started this rebuild. We sort of didn't have a lot of young talent in the pipeline. Obviously everyone wants to bring up the bench mob, but I think people forgot that, Bebe and Norm and other players were in and out of that second unit. So, we think we have 11, 12 rotation guys, and I think that third group always wants to push the second group. The second group always wants to push the first group. And I think that dynamic worked well for us. And having a little bit of looking over your shoulder, I think, has been good. And I think that's what we have now. And so if you feel a couple of the footsteps, I think it probably brings out the best in you.
How much of that is on Darko to make the right decisions on the court, and then the top-down view of you guys saying, we like this guy, we think he should have a decent run at this position? Like, how does that meld together now?
Yeah, that's the job. I think that's why you're in constant communication, right? We don't draft Colin without talking to Darko, right? We don't sort of sign Sandro without talking to our coaching staff. And so all of those discussions hopefully have happened prior to the decisions on the court, and so once they roll the ball out there, obviously the coaching staff makes those decisions. But I would say hopefully it's not a case where we're not on the same page with them as far as like how we see the player or how we see the development. And that's just sort of a sign of a good organization or good company in general.
How does Grady fit in this year? Like, obviously a big start last year, then kind of things didn't go as well. I mean, how does he fit into everything, and what are you expecting out of him?
Yeah, I think consistency with Grady. I think you guys will see him. He's bigger, stronger, and sort of that's the natural, jump for these players. I think the shooting obviously unlocks a lot for not only him on the court, but obviously the team, his competitiveness on the defensive end. But yeah, he's a third-year guy, and so I think, you want continued expectations, but I think from him is just a fully consistent season and not have as many ups and downs.
Just on the Thunder obviously beat the Pacers in 7 in the finals. Were there any lessons, especially in terms of maybe team building strategies or even just on the court strategies that you saw that the Pacers did well or the Thunder did well that you would like to sort of incorporate here?
Yeah, if we could be as good as a finals team. We always say it's copycat. You think back to when we won, and then everyone wanted this sort of big two-way wings, and then then it became, before that it was a big three. I think probably what OKC did really well was the defensive stuff, right? I mean, it was very clear watching them play the sort of attacking style on defense. Was really played well not only to their personnel, but I think obviously on to win on the court. And then I think Indiana was just fun to watch. I think anyone who watched that team and was rooting for them, there's so many unexpected moments. And so the fan in me or the fan in any of us, I think really enjoyed that Pacers run. And, to get to a Game 7, obviously the injury was unfortunate. But I think that was probably as fun as basketball as we've seen in a while.
Speaking of injuries, there's been a lot obviously in the past, obviously with the playoffs. And the Raptors are kind of known for having a pretty good system of trying to avoid that. So what goes into kind of the conversations maybe on your level when it comes to trying to prevent some of those injuries that we were seeing kind of in the late playoffs last year?
I don't know, if you can prevent injuries and be, a billionaire. That's what I always tell sort of young kids as I get into that. For us, I think we try to take it as long-term of approach. So, when the season ends, unfortunately this past year in April, there's a plan to get to October 1, right? And I think that maybe hopefully is something that we've sort of not initially developed, but something that we've prioritized over the years is sort of what does a full off season look like as opposed to what does next week look like. And so just to take that big picture of how do we get to October 1 with guys healthy and with guys ready for a season.
You just mentioned that, team building is a moving target, and obviously with the way that the CBA has been structured over the last couple of seasons, you're now seeing it shake out in terms of team building decisions. What do you think has changed over the last couple of years in terms of what teams are prioritizing around the league?
I you see it as the depth, right? Having a lot of low-cost depth on your team, it's really going to be hard to package the max guys together and then also fill out your roster. Not that I think that doesn't work sort of if you want to go for it for a year or two, but I think if you want sort of more long-term viability and success, you're probably going to have a deeper team and have some guys on some reasonably priced deals to actually fit in those max guys.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bobby.
Bobby.